Recording Pac was crazy, as you might imagine. On some days, it was the easiest job I could ever have. On other days, it was damn near impossible. Suffice it to say, if you got 50 G's up in the room, waving guns, smoking blunts, drinking 40s, carrying on, it can get a little hectic up in the control room. What's up, Pac fans? What's up, hip-hop heads? Josh Javoc is Tupac's audio engineer from the pre-Death Row days, bringing you some more knowledge. Now, today, I want to talk a little bit about how Pac used to like to write his rhymes, how he used to like to record his rhymes in the studio, some of the idiosyncrasies he had about recording his rhymes, and a little insight on, some of the things in the setup, the mics I like to use, and different things I used to use to record them. So if we're going to tell the story about how Tupac recorded his vocals, we should start at the beginning and talk about how he used to like to write his rhymes. Now, unlike a lot of other artists, Tupac used to write 90% of his rhymes in the studio. He didn't come in with his rhymes pre-written. Typically, he would get a beat. We would set him up in the room with the tape machine on cycle. And that was back in the old days. We used to have actual tapes instead of Pro Tools and stuff. So we'd set the 2-inch on so it would play the whole song, rewind back to the beginning, play it again. And you'd leave Pac in the room for about 4 or 5 hours and he'd write his rhymes. Now, sometimes this would be him just sitting at the console by himself. Sometimes that could be him with the crew hooting and hollering, carrying on, getting them all hyped up in the room, depended on the day. But almost always, without fail, Pac would be in that room with the main speakers, the big giant speakers that we have in the studio that simulate like being at the club. He would have the mains cranked up on stun level, like 11, as loud as they could get for 4 or 5 hours straight. So Pac, he could just listen to the speakers on stun level non-stop. But no other human could really do that. So we actually wound up having to get Unique Recording bought the airline hearing protecting, the big green airline hearing protectors that you see when you're out there and they're backing the planes up. And one of my assistants, either Dan Baroff or Ron Malloy, would be sitting in the control room babysitting Pac with these giant earmuffs on so their ears weren't bleeding. So Pac would listen so loud that he often blew up speakers. And he was very attentive too. You think he wasn't paying attention, but he learned early on about the makeup button on the SSL console. When you're using the quad compressor, you can get extra gain at the end of anything you have. So if I set up the levels so he couldn't blow up the speakers and he'd push the master fader all the way up, he knew how to press the button, get to the makeup gain on the console, and turn up the music as loud as he possibly wanted on the main speakers. Now, unfortunately, as loud as Tupac wanted to turn it up on the main speakers was most often well beyond the capability that those speakers were designed for. So Pac used to blow up speakers constantly. We were blowing mains all the time. And we'd have to call the tech guys, take a break, and he'd be yelling, "Oh, why are the speakers blowing?" I'm like, "Pac, you can't push them that hard or they're just going to blow up." But he'd just keep doing it anyway, and we'd just have to take a break and they'd run down and replace the main speaker. It got so bad to a point that I remember Bobby Nathan, the owner of Unique, the owner of the studio, calls me and he's like, "Hey, Josh, you got to tell Tupac to stop blowing up speakers." And I said to Bobby, I'm like, "Bobby, are you crazy?" I'm like, "You tell that crazy motherfucker to stop blowing up speakers. I'm not going to do that. As far as I'm concerned, Pac can blow up as many speakers as he wants to. Let him blow up speakers to the wazoo. I'm not going to tell him to not do it because, hell, it's much better to blow up speakers than tell Tupac not to do anything. That's for damn sure." Back to recording the rhyme. Now, the reason that I hate when artists would write in the studio is inevitably you would have to punch in a million times. They didn't have them committed to memory. They would say their verses with no feeling and no emotion. They couldn't really rock it right. Well, here's the craziest part. As I think has been talking before, Tupac never punched in. He refused to punch in. He was militant about punching in. As a matter of fact, he could crush the first 2 verses of the rhymes, and if he got to the 3rd verse and messed it up, that was it. He had to go back to the beginning all the way and re-record the whole thing. even more remarkable that he would never punch in, that he was that skilled, was the fact that he would have just written his rhymes like a couple hours before. And not only would he have written them, he wouldn't have to look at his pad. He'd have his pad in there, but he wouldn't have to look at it. He'd have them committed to memory. He wouldn't mess up his rhymes. He would say them with crazy conviction, and you would be mesmerized. He would make sure that I was erasing whatever we had done before, and not just putting him on a separate track to try another take, because he didn't even want those first two verses to exist anymore. He wanted one take to exist. He wanted to start from beginning to end, and that was it. So he never punched in. It was remarkable. So it was pretty cool the way he worked. Now, I will say, I one time had the audacity, and this wasn't in the beginning for sure, because in the beginning I never would have done this, but we had been working together for a couple years at this point, and I forget what record we were working on, but he had ripped this first verse like incredible. Now, he always was incredible, right? And his rhymes were always great, but this was like beyond super incredible. Like, I was like mesmerized by this first verse. He messed up in the second. He said, all right, take me back to the beginning. So I don't know what got into me that day. I reached for the talk back button and I said, yo, Pac, you sure you don't want to listen to that first verse? That shit was dope. You should probably listen to that and see. Oh man, he got mad at me. He said, whose Eminem record is this anyway? Is this Josh's record? Or is this Eminem and Tupac's record? And I pressed the talkback mic and I said, well, you know it's your record, Pac, for sure. It's your record. And he said, all right then. He said, take me back to the beginning and I'm going to do it again. And as I'm rewinding the tape back, he says to me, and don't worry about it. I'm going to do it again even better this next time. And sure enough, he ripped it even better the next time, ripped it all the way to the end, and we kept that take, and that was that. So, yeah, that's how Pac, that's how he did. He would rhyme all the way from the beginning to the end, no punching. Then we would get a double track where he would double himself up. Now, his doubles were spot on. Another thing that I hated a lot of the times about rappers who did doubles, they'd have these sloppy doubles. They'd kind of be off the beat. They'd be wandering. So it would just sound all mumble jumbled against their original take. But Pac's doubles were tight. His timing was on. He'd remember how he did it the first time, and he'd do it the second time exactly the same way he did the first time. And then he would record a triple. Now, his triple would sometimes be exactly the same as the double. Sometimes he would drop words in and out as he did his triple. And his triple would be most of the whole track, but, maybe dropping some lines out here or there. It depended on the record. And then there would be either one or sometimes two ad-lib tracks on top of that, too. So he would do his main rhymes. He'd do his double. He'd do his triple. It could be a whole or it could be piecemeal. And then he would do one or two ad-lib tracks, depending on the record that we were working on. And that is how he recorded the rhymes, wrote the rhymes, and how he blew up a whole bunch of speakers in the studio. When he got into the vocal booth, he would pretty much always have his shirt off. I don't know what it was, but when Bach wanted to do his rhymes, he wanted to have his shirt off, and he liked to have the lights down low, too, so we get a little mood lighting. He liked his headphones loud, because he liked everything loud, of course. So there was always tons of bleed on the mic from his headphones. But he didn't like his vocals loud. He wanted the beat to be loud, and he wanted his vocals to be in the background in his headphone mix, too. So he would like to have the vocals, he would like to have the lights down low, and he always had his shirt off. But on particular days where he was extra hype, he'd do something even more unique. He'd say, turn all the lights off, and he would strip down to his boxers. I mean, we couldn't see, but he would tell us that's what he was doing, so nobody would walk into the live room, once we turned the lights off. And it was funny because you'd hear him rapping in there, and you just see the burning ember of the blunt. All you could see is like a little red ember, kind of bouncing up and down like that as he's rhyming. And I didn't use a tube mic on Pac. I preferred the transistor sound on kind of rap presence. So I used mostly a FET 47, and then that would go into a N.I.G.G.A.Z. Vintage N.I.G.A.Z. always mic for either 1073, 1099, 1089, whatever we had in the particular room that we were working in. And I didn't like to manipulate much with EQ or compression of tape, so it'd just be a little bit of extra top end because we're recording the tape back in that day, and you're going to lose some top end. And then I'd have a 1176 on the end of the chain, just on a limit, basically just above wherever he was the loudest in whatever song we were working on. So if he got amped up on any particular tape, or got amped up because now it's go time, I would catch any kind of overages. But other than that, I would just ride the fader for the levels, try to keep it as uncompressed and as natural and unprocessed as we possibly can.